A new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows tightening races in the Democratic primary. Former Vice President Joe Biden continues to be the first choice among Democratic voters in the first 18 expected primary and caucus states. The 5-point lead over Senator Elizabeth Warren is slimmer than the 14-point advantage he held in last month's poll. But both Warren and Senator Kamala Harris saw increases in the number of voters considering them, indicating they might have room to gain. Now, joining me now to unpack all these results is CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. All right, Caitlin, not only did this poll support these candidates or show support for these candidates, it also projected that many delegates could be earned at the convention based on this result. So explain to us, how exactly does the delegate process work?
Right. It's a great question. And what I love about CBS News polling is that it looks at the delegate count and not necessarily the horse race, because that's where this race will be determined. Whoever gets 1885, a number of delegates will win the nomination. And so when you're looking at these early states, that's what these candidates are competing for. They're competing for delegates. And in order to get delegates, you have to reach at least 15% in a lot of these states to earn any of those delegates. So that's what these campaigns are really focused on. And this takes place in Iowa all the way to the Super Tuesday states of California and Texas. So what we're starting to see in this battleground poll is how the voters are considering these candidates, and they're considering them in these tiers. So you have, as you mentioned, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden in that top tier. Others like Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke in that middle tier, and the rest polling way down low. And we'll see after this next debate next month whether those lower polling candidates drop out of the race.
So Pete Buttigieg, one thing that was surprising to me is we didn't see him on the delegate estimate. He has more money than any other candidate besides Bernie Sanders. So where's his support?
That's the question that we have been asking ever since he reported $25 million raised in the second quarter. It was a huge number. He raised more money than all of these candidates did in that second quarter, but his polling has not kept up with that. So I talked to the campaign about this, and they were going to shift strategy a little bit. In the very beginning, they were focused on creating a national identity for him, getting him everywhere that he could possibly be, and really focused on those big fundraisers. Spent a lot of time in New York and California. Now they're shifting approach. Now they're going back to the basics, working on the retail campaigning in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, trying to find an actual base of support that will turn out for him in those primary and caucus states.
Well, speaking of Iowa, let's take a look at some of those individual early states. We're less than 200 days away until the Iowa caucuses and the start of early voting in the California primary. So what are you seeing in those races?
Well, Iowa, of course, goes first, but states like California are going to play an even more critical role. California is going up earlier in the process. It's going on Super Tuesday, and it has the most delegates to give, 416 delegates. And what's interesting about this poll is that you see Biden and Kamala Harris leading in California, but you're also seeing other candidates like Elizabeth Warren doing well in certain areas. And that's going to be the approach to California. Most candidates used to go there to raise money. Now they're there to hunt for delegates. And this could be a place where it's very difficult to campaign on the ground. This is a place that a lot of voters are going to be looking at the national environment. So that's why it's also important to do well in a place like Iowa or New Hampshire, so that these voters in bigger states are looking at kind of where the field is shaping up.
Any excuse to go to the Iowa State Fair, really, that's what I say.
Absolutely, yeah. Give me us all that fried food. They'll definitely be there, but they're going to be also campaigning in California and Texas, which is a little bit different from last time.
So let's look at likely Democratic voters. They ticked off the issues that were most important to them: healthcare, climate change, income inequality. No big shockers there, but how will this play out throughout the election?
That's right, and this is what a lot of the candidates are focused on. You know, Mueller is testifying this week, and that's a big story, but we rarely hear voters ask about that process. Instead, they're really concerned about healthcare, climate change, income inequality, and on healthcare, they're really concerned about the cost of it, especially, and that's what we're hearing also from voters on the ground in our own reporting.
Well, let's dig in a little bit deeper on some of those numbers, though. On healthcare, our poll shows that 56% of Democrats support creating a national government-administered Medicare for all. available to all individuals, but only 37% think this system would actually work better if it replaced all private insurance. So what does that mean for candidates like Bernie Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, who are endorsing Medicare for all?
That's right. It's a very popular, on the surface, it's a popular proposal. You have our polls showing that, and you've also seen it in other polls. But this also shows that when you dig down deeper, when you look at the details, when you ask people about whether this would change their current plan, whether this would change how much they're paying in taxes, that's when this kind of proposal becomes more and more unpopular, when they look back at those details. And this is what the Democrats are trying to figure out in the primary. You have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders advocating for this. You have Joe Biden saying, wait a second, let's build upon Obamacare, saying that he's concerned that this would make changes that people wouldn't like.
So I was really interested, too, though, in President Trump's approval numbers, because he likes to tout those. We're not always sure where he gets his numbers, but we have our numbers. Let's look at those. And they show that 46% of all Americans think he's doing a somewhat or very good job, compared to 54% the other way. So how strong is that of a position for an incumbent?
Right, and you see the partisan breakdown there too. I had the same question, so I looked back at 2011, around this time in 2011 when Obama was running for re-election, and his numbers were actually pretty similar, about 45-46% approval. So it's always difficult for an incumbent president to run for re-election. History has shown that. Some do well, some don't. What the president, though, is banking on is that the economy stays at the place that it is now, or even improves even more. And that's why you have Democrats saying, wait a second, the economy may look good on paper, but what I'm seeing in terms of wages, healthcare costs, access to education, that the economy isn't quite working for everyone. So listen for that to be their argument. You also hear people like Elizabeth Warren today kind of warning that the economy may take a turn.
But you hear the president always hammering on the economy. Your supporters, I'm sure you've been to rallies, I've been to rallies. They all say, I know somebody who got a job, I know somebody's business is doing better. So he definitely has that economy on his side.
Tale of two countries we may see.
Truly. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much for joining us.